Okay, let's talk today about hormones and body fat. Most people are familiar with the effect of at least one hormone on body fat, which is insulin. People know that insulin is a storage hormone in the sense that it helps you store amino acids as protein. In other words, insulin helps amino acids enter into muscle tissue. Insulin also stimulates body fat storage by stimulating the synthesis of triglycerides within lipocytes or fat cells. It does this by stimulating certain enzymes that promote body fat synthesis. So insulin is considered a fattening hormone, although there's a big controversy about that. The entire basis of low carbohydrate diets are based on the idea that controlling insulin helps to control body fat. And there are people that deny that. They call people that espouse insulin as a fattening hormone, they call them insulin fairies. Apparently they must have forgotten their physiology textbooks because they fail to realize that when insulin is secreted, body fat is either synthesized or body fat oxidation is blocked. Insulin serves to keep you fat. In other words, it wants to stimulate body fat. And of course, the more calories you overeat in relation to physical activity, yes, insulin will be involved in that. But they say that if you're not consuming, the people that oppose insulin as a source of body fat accretion, they claim that if you're not consuming too many calories, or if you're consuming less calories than you burn, insulin is an innocent bystander that plays no role in body fat accretion. There's some truth to that too, but the truth of the matter is, if you control insulin, if you, for example, consume less carbohydrates, particularly refined carbohydrates that stimulate the greatest insulin release, you will, without a doubt, be able to oxidize greater amounts of fat, because insulin prevents your body from utilizing fat. So insulin, as I said, it's a storage hormone. The main function of insulin, as most people know, is to ferry glucose, or allow glucose to enter cells to be used as energy. Your body's always secreting insulin small amounts throughout the day. There's something called insulin resistance, where your cells become resistant to insulin. One of the causes, there's a couple of causes. For example, having too much fat in your liver, that's called non-alcoholic fatty liver. That's related to insulin resistance. Having too much visceral fat, or fat in your lower abdomen or around your internal organs, that's related to insulin resistance. And just having more and larger fat cells, body fat itself, is directly related to insulin, and it's a vicious circle, because the more body fat you have, usually the greater the insulin resistance, which makes you even fatter. So the way to reduce insulin resistance is to greatly decrease your carbohydrate intake, especially refined carbohydrate, but maintain your dietary fiber intake, because the dietary fiber feeds the intestinal microbiome, the population of organisms that reside in the large intestine, and these secrete various short-chain fatty acids and other substances that help modulate and decrease insulin resistance. So, ways to increase insulin sensitivity: exercises. Exercise actually allows your muscles will uptake glucose without insulin. Your muscles are the main organs that your body uses to dispose of insulin. So the more exercise you do, within a judicious range, you don't want to go crazy and work out 20 hours a day, but exercise greatly increases insulin sensitivity. They've done studies with a form of aerobic training called high intensity interval aerobics. I've talked about in other videos. I don't want to get into that, but it involves alternating high and low levels of intensity during an aerobic session. Well, that type of exercise increases insulin sensitivity for 24 to 48 hours immediately, and it actually increases it. Sleep is very important. Even one night of sleep, forget about body fat, what kind of shape you're in, it makes no difference. Even just one night of poor sleep, and when I say poor sleep, I'm talking about less than 7 hours of sleep, that will cause insulin resistance in anybody. Sleep is very closely related to insulin resistance. Make sure another way to increase insulin sensitivity is to ensure that you ingest enough omega-3 fatty acids, such as found in fatty fish, halibut, mackerel, sardines. What's the other one? Salmon. There's a couple of fatty fish. These are high in omega-3. You want to eat this type of fish at least 2 to 3 times a week. If you don't like fish, take a fish oil supplement. Aim to get about at least 4 grams a day of omega-3, and that will help increase insulin sensitivity. You might want to also consider a type of diet known to increase insulin sensitivity. Probably one of the better ones is called the Mediterranean diet. It focuses on fresh vegetables, some fruit, a little bit of fat from nuts, and stuff like extra virgin olive oil, a little bit of red wines included. And you want to probably decrease your intake of saturated and never consume trans fats. Trans fats are an artificial type of fat that definitely causes insulin insensitivity. When you keep your weight down and lose body fat, you will automatically, without doing anything else, increase insulin sensitivity. And when you do eat carbohydrates, try to eat the low glycemic, high fiber carbohydrates. In other words, when low glycemic are the ones that, let's say, don't stimulate as much insulin. They have what they call a lower glycemic number. You could check it out. They have a glycemic index. Just do a search online for glycemic index. Any fruit or vegetable that has a glycemic index of under 50 is considered low glycemic index. And if you eat the whole fruit, you're getting the fiber. That's going to increase insulin sensitivity. There's certain supplements that are touted to increase insulin sensitivity. These include the trace mineral chromium. I've used chromium. I found very little effect on insulin sensitivity, very little effect. And the other one is cinnamon. Cinnamon is supposed to improve the efficiency of insulin, thereby increasing insulin sensitivity. I've experimented with various doses of cinnamon, and the best type of cinnamon is called Ceylon cinnamon. For reasons it has to do with a certain substance that's found in the natural cinnamon. I can't remember what it's called. Warfarin. It's the same stuff that's found in the drug warfarin that basically inhibits blood clotting. There's a natural form found in some forms of cinnamon. The Ceylon cinnamon contains less of this potentially toxic compound. I've experimented with cinnamon in various doses up to 12 grams a day. I found almost no effect whatsoever on insulin sensitivity. Cinnamon, however, does do other things. It's great for lowering your low-density lipoprotein cholesterol, slightly raises high-density lipoprotein, and some research shows that it's good for your brain, also helps prevent the accumulation of beta amyloid, which is associated with Alzheimer's disease. So cinnamon might not be that great for lowering blood glucose or increasing sensitivity, but it does do other things. And also, studies show that excessive amounts of chromium, not cinnamon, too much chromium has a reverse effect and actually decreases insulin sensitivity. So don't eat more than, let's say, 300 micrograms of chromium a day. That should be the top. One hormone that's closely associated with obesity is called leptin. Leptin was discovered in 1994, and it's classified as a adipokine. Adipokine is a substance. They're proteins released by fat cells or lipocytes. There are over 100 adipokines. Most of them, including leptin, are inflammatory. In other words, the worst thing about having a lot of body fat, besides the aesthetic appearance, is the fact that your fat cells secrete these various adipokines, which stimulate systemic inflammation, which gradually destroys your body and leads to a number of deathly diseases, including cardiovascular disease and cancer. However, leptin in relation to body weight, having a little bit higher leptin levels is good because it signals your brain It sends a signal to the brain that your fat cells are full. Therefore, you don't have to eat more, and it more or less turns off your appetite. So now, when leptin was first discovered in 1994, they injected it into specially genetically bred fat mice called OB mice. These mice were genetically bred to be very fat. They were the equivalent of morbidly obese humans. And when they injected leptin has to be injected because it's a peptide. It's just a amino acids. You can't ingest it in a pill form because it would be broken down. But when they injected it in the mice, all the mice lost all of their body fat. And of course, this made huge headlines. Leptin was called the molecule of the year. I forget what year it was, 1995, I can't remember. But leptin was heralded as the absolute cure for obesity. Fat people all over the place were rejoicing because they felt now they could eat their pizza and their ice cream and they don't have to worry. All they got to do is take shots of leptin, and they would not get fat, and it would take all the fat off their body without even dieting. Unfortunately, it turned out that was wrong. Turns out that people that are obese actually secrete more leptin than usual. They secrete more leptin than usual, but what happens is the signal that leptin sends to the brain for some reason doesn't get through. So the body secretes higher amounts of leptin to try and get through, but this only actually promotes greater fat buildup rather than less fat buildup. So how do you improve your leptin levels? Well, you want to keep your body weight down. You want to keep your body fat down. The decrease in body fat helps reduce leptin levels. Very important, again, sleep. When you don't get enough sleep, leptin level declines, and that will make you very hungry. When you're during the day, you wind up overeating and gaining body fat. Exercise always decreases leptin. So exercise is another way of controlling leptin. The flip side of leptin is another hormone called ghrelin. Ghrelin is secreted in the stomach. It's actually is what they call a ligand for growth hormone. It actually interacts with the growth hormone receptor, and it stimulates growth hormone release. In fact, the drugs that are sold online called growth hormone secretagogues are actually based on ghrelin, because ghrelin directly interacts with growth hormone receptors. Now that would indicate that, well, if I have ghrelin, since growth hormone promotes fat loss, ghrelin should make me nice and slim, right? No. Ghrelin is the most appetite-stimulating hormone secreted in your body. Ghrelin, when you eat a meal, ghrelin levels drop, and then in between meals it gradually rises, and when it rises you get hungry and want to eat again. They think that your body works ghrelin that way to make you eat so you don't die of starvation, because it's the most stimulating hunger appetite known. It's just the opposite of leptin. Leptin turns off the appetite, ghrelin turns it on. And when you don't get enough sleep, leptin goes down and ghrelin goes up, which is why you could gain a lot of body fat from poor sleep habits unless you have super willpower and are able to keep your calorie intake lower than your physical activity. So the way to manage ghrelin, again, keep your body fat level low because, again, obesity is sensitive to ghrelin. The fatter you are, the more ghrelin you're going to secrete. Again, be careful of the sleep. Get a minimal 7 hours sleep, and also try and don't go too long between a meal unless you're fasting, because the ghrelin levels will go up between meals and make you hungrier, and you might wind up overeating. Cortisol is another hormone that's associated with obesity, especially in the central or trunk area of the body. For some reason, cortisol tends to build up a lot of fat in the central area of the body. A lot of people blame centralized obesity, having a big gut. They blame it on cortisol. The truth is, though, that cortisol is very rarely the cause of that obesity. Most of the type of obesity is caused by lack of exercise and overeating, especially carbohydrates. Cortisol is a stress hormone that rises when you're under stress. If you're under a lot of stress, you can wind up secreting too much cortisol. In those situations, if you're also eating a lot of bad food or overeating carbohydrates, cortisol will promote fat accretion in the central area of the body. Again, poor sleep habits. If you're not getting enough sleep, cortisol levels will go up. You want to exercise regularly. When you exercise, cortisol has a strange effect. Excess cortisol, a lot of bodybuilders know this, too much cortisol, as occurs during overtraining, has a muscle catabolism effect. It breaks down muscle. That's if you over-exercise. However, you would have to do more than an hour of aerobics for cortisol levels to begin to rise. And normally during exercise, cortisol actually, as a fat mobilizing hormone, it stimulates the release of fat during exercise to supply you with additional exercise. A lot of people don't know that. So that's what cortisol does. But probably the best way to control cortisol would be to, try and avoid excess stress, because stress is the biggest promoter of cortisol. Estrogen. A lot of bodybuilders are very aware of estrogen. They blame estrogen. Estrogen is called a female hormone because women secrete more estrogen than men, but the truth of the matter is estrogen is produced in both sexes. In male, estrogen has a couple of beneficial effects. It helps to maintain beneficial high-density lipoprotein levels, and it seems to be good for brain health and bone health. In women, it does a lot of other things. It has to do with the female reproductive system, immune system. I'm not going to get into it. It's involved in the menstrual cycle. But bodybuilders are aware of estrogen because excess estrogen tends to cause water retention and a buildup of fat just under the skin called subcutaneous fat that is associated with decreased muscle definition. Now what happens is certain anabolic steroids can be converted into estrogen through the actions of a enzyme called aromatase. And to combat this, bodybuilders very often, if they're using steroids that can be converted to estrogen, they use other drugs called aromatase inhibitors, or they use one that's a estrogen receptor blocker called Novadex to block the effects of estrogen and thereby prevent those effects of estrogen. A little known fact about estrogen, though, is in men, testosterone levels tend to drop with age, but estrogen in men is made from testosterone. About 8% of the testosterone men produce naturally is converted into estrogen by that same aromatase enzyme. As I said, estrogen is important. A certain minimal amount of estrogen is important for men's health. However, when men age, as their testosterone drops, their estrogen level drops. And believe it or not, they used to think that the fat that accumulated around the waist as men get older, they blame that on testosterone, lower testosterone levels. In point of fact, it's lower estrogen levels. Low estrogen levels tend to increase fat around the waist. So that's something to think about. How do you maintain healthy estrogen levels? Estrogen is related to body fat. So again, if you keep your body fat down, if you want, especially if you're a man, if you want to have lower estrogen levels, exercise helps to control estrogen, and follow a balanced diet that will control estrogen. Certain foods will help you convert active estrogen into less active forms that have less effects on the body. These are found in cruciferous vegetables like broccoli and Brussels sprouts, bok choy. These things contain certain chemicals that will convert the active form of estrogen into a less active form that does not stimulate body fat accretion. So there's that for estrogen. There's a peptide called Neuropeptide Y that's very associated with obesity and weight gain. It's activated in body fat, increases fat storage. It's associated with abdominal obesity and the metabolic syndrome, which is related to cardiovascular disease. The higher levels of Neuropeptide Y greatly increase your penchant for eating carbohydrate, including bad carbohydrates. So you want to control Neuropeptide Y. Exercise lowers Neuropeptide Y, and you want to keep not consume processed carbohydrates or unrefined carbohydrates without fiber, because that will also increase Neuropeptide Y and stimulate your desire to eat more carbohydrates, which will increase body fat. You might have heard about the glucagon peptide 1 agonist drugs, such as Ozempic and Wegovy. These work because they mimic the effects of another peptide called glucagon-like peptide 1. It's produced in the gut. It helps insulin work better, which is why the main use of GLP-1 agonists like Ozempic is not for weight loss, but it's to help make insulin work better and help diabetics control their blood glucose levels. But it also, it's a big rage right now. It's very popular, these drugs like Ozempic, because it seems to stimulate body fat loss. It does that by turning off the appetite, just like leptin. Glucagon-like peptide in the brain turns off the appetite centers. It also imparts a feeling of fullness. So if you're taking these like drugs like Ozempic, you're just not going to have much of an appetite. You're going to consume less calories, and that's your weight loss. Eating protein, especially whey protein. Whey protein is a natural GLP-1 agonist. It stimulates GLP release. Yogurt does too. Probiotics will also stimulate probiotics, which are very good for your intestinal microbiome. They stimulate GLP. And I have an upcoming article in my Applied Metabolics where I extensively explain everything to increase GLP-1 naturally. So people that either can't get the GLP-1 agonist drugs, which by the way cost about $1,200 a month, unless you have insurance, and even with insurance it's still a couple $100 a month. If you can't afford that, there's certain foods and nutrients you can eat that will stimulate GLP-1 naturally. And this will be in an article in my Applied Metabolics coming up. Another hormone associated with body composition is cholecystokinin. Cholecystokinin, it makes you feel full. It's stimulated by fat. When you eat fat, cholecystokinin or CCK is released, and it stimulates the release of bile from the gallbladder. Bile is needed to emulsify fat so that it can be worked on by lipases, fat digesting enzymes. People who are obese or have high body fat levels have reduced sensitivity to CCK or cholecystokinin, and that can lead to overeating. High protein diet will help increase CCK levels, and so will exercise. Peptide YY, another gut hormone that decreases appetite. Again, people with high body fat levels have lower levels of peptide YY, and again, exercise will increase that. Some research shows that the paleo diet, which focuses on protein, whole fruits and vegetables, can raise peptide YY levels. This initial research shows that. So that's basically, let's see, where am I? I'm at 23 minutes, so I'm going to end it here. But those are some of the other hormones besides insulin that are associated with body fat. I write about these topics in much more detail regularly in my Applied Metabolics publication. And if you want to know the really in-depth information about this type of material, I strongly suggest you subscribe to Applied Metabolics. I cover nutrition, exercise science, anti-aging research, ergogenic aids, effective fat loss techniques, supplement science, which ones work, which ones don't, women's health and fitness, and other topics. I cover more topics in Applied Metabolics than any other digital publication on the entire internet, and it's all written in everyday magazine style because I'm a professional writer. I've been a writer for nearly 50 years. None of the people that write other digital publications have any actual writing experience like I do. I know how to write for the public. I also include little stories about the golden days of bodybuilding, when I trained with Arnold Schwarzenegger and other famous people. All of that is in Applied Metabolics. So subscribe today at www.appliedmetabolics.com. Send me an email when you subscribe, and I'll send you an invitation to join my private Applied Metabolics Facebook page, where each day I post new information on nutrition, exercise science, and general health. I have an email portal on my Applied Metabolics webpage where current subscribers only. I don't accept unsolicited questions. Current subscribers can send me short questions about anything they read in Applied Metabolics or anything that comes to mind related to nutrition and exercise, and I'll try and answer it for them as a service and appreciation for your subscription. Obviously, if you're not a subscriber, you get no appreciation and no answer from me. But anyway, well, you're welcome to leave comments under these videos, especially topics for future videos. If I feel that the topic has a lot of interest for a lot of people, I'll try and do a video on it. So I think that's about it. And if you like my videos, you know, these are really plain vanilla. I admit it. These are plain vanilla videos. There's no fancy text. There's no cartoons. There's no graphics. You know, I'm a writer and a researcher, and I'm not really into graphics programs and all that stuff. I don't have the time for that. I leave that to others. So I just give you the basic, honest truth. Everything I tell you in my videos, you could count on as being 100% truth, completely devoid of commercial context. And the same goes to my newsletter. I mean, I'm not a newsletter. I don't call it a newsletter anymore. My publication, Applied Metabolics. Everything in there is 100% evidence-based, and I'm not trying to sell you anything, no products. And I'm not sponsored by any company like 99% of the other people that do YouTube videos. They're all shills for various companies. You got to be careful of what they say. They're always going to try and sell you something. The only thing I'm trying to say is Applied Metabolics, because I think it would help just about everybody, no matter what your level of education or experience. So subscribe today. And again, if you like my videos, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is what you're looking at now, and tell others about it. You know, tell others about it. I mean, it is a source of frustration for me. I will readily admit, when I see some of these videos and I see they have like 500,000 or more subscribers, and the content they're giving people is absolute bullshit, absolute garbage. But they do have fancy graphics, and they have the cartoons and all this garbage. But the material that they're giving you is garbage. So if you really want to just look at garbage and be entertained, go ahead, subscribe to them. But if you want the honest, useful, practical information that you can use to improve your life, subscribe to my channel. That's about it. Take care. If you want to have the best fun you'll ever have, go to your local shelter and adopt a dog.